no coordination, there's no administration, there's no enforcement from the government. It's the practicality of who we are as a country right now. You look at UN sitting here as the new or the world order, we say. UN sits governing the rule of law in the world. It doesn't come to play when it comes to our own realities in this country. PNG is subscribed to as a nation. But do we report against those treaties? We don't. Every time we make decisions about our land, it comes back to us as individuals. I'll give you another example of people of Veraibari. They sit right between where the LNG pipeline is, where the oil pipeline is, and they are displaced 4 or 5 times. Right now they are digging drain. They're trying to plan where they'll dig the bones of their ancestors and bury them where. This is climate change. Who did climate change? Is this our ancestral indigenous way of... We are saving the world because we are the 3rd largest rainforest nation in the world because of who we are, indigenous people managing our land the way we are, and we're saving the planet because of us keeping our environment on our land. We are the answer to the world today with what we have. But then there is a bigger force that's coming also because we've become a nation. We've inherited a system that we will have to be part of. And it's not easy for us to talk about how we govern. It's good we have the political will here who has the heart to do what's right. We may never have a chance like this anymore. But then we must do it our way. The PNG way, going back to what our forefathers, the wisdom our forefathers that we don't have now. We do not have those wisdoms now because their experience in those days was completely different from the 50,000-year-old experience they had. We don't have those now. The consultation now would be completely different from what that was. We can have people with masters and degrees writing the laws, but you need the wisdom of the land. When it comes to managing those who are displaced, it comes back to people who own the land and they deal with cultural governance. When there is an issue, the first person they go to would be a church leader, a councillor, or a village chief, not the police. The government system is not there. The cultural governance again, where the trust is. But we want the government also. Because we're already in a world where you are governed by religious worldview, you're governed by capitalist worldview, you're governed by your own ancestral, native, the 50,000-year-old wisdom from your land that you don't only know here, but you feel it in your heart and you feel it in your bones and in your marrow. So you carry that wisdom, the bloodline from your ancestors. You carry it in your language. And that what governs all the customary land. That's right. We need that wisdom in everything we do. When it comes to people being displaced with SAV, with GBV, with climate change, we didn't ask for climate change. But PNG will be one of those countries that will be affected by this so-called world order. We're stuck right in there. And we are the ones to make the decision for this country, for us. We will all have to use our wisdom together with the will that's there, the political will that's there. I hope the MPs in the parliament do what's right, because it's crazy. Everything that's happening right now, people are killing and dying for what? Money. But you can get 10 toya, yeah. You bungi mo get 10 toya, you bungi mo get 2 kina, 5 kina, 100 kina, but you cook him lo potna. Kaya want a family blue you. Look at. Value your life bring me no money. Value your ground bring you no money. You must look service. You know not money blow you. We have the freedom. When you say the freedom, we have it. We don't have rules that govern us to pay tax from a customary land every day. You look at the big cities that have to pay tax, to have to work hard to build a house, work hard to buy materials. God blessed us with our land. But when we also live in a world that we're already a nation, we've got to balance it somehow. When the consultation, before the bill is passed, the consultation needs to happen nationwide. You will have the people's support so long as people understand what it is. So long as you capture, ground emosembwinia. This la when me pull him na style plave, ground blow me one kind of sembwinia. Me no na buy him no money, but him giving me life na me stop. Me no work him garden long him or me no work him business long him to him stop na me stop life. That's why me talking priceless in noga trillion billion go on top long him noga price long him. Thank you so much for the opportunity you've given for us. I'm sharing this because when it comes to customary land, it's the people that make the decision. But they make the decision based on their values. They make the decision because of what fits them every day on the table. And it's their forest, their supermarket. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kathy. And I think you really touched upon the three quite complex scenarios that occur during displacement. You have the need for communities to support local integration. How does that work how is there a PNG version of what that looks like? You talked about resettlement. You talked about also return, what the end state of resettlement looks like, securing land and services before people move, and having a clear coordination system with authority and grievance mechanisms. From your experience, where does the process most often break down? And where does it work? And how can we help to ensure that resettlement is more predictable in practice, recognizing some of the drivers that Kathy talked to?
Thank you very much, David. Good afternoon, everybody. And I was struck by the passion with which Kathy spoke. And I think that as a foreigner who has been here for only a year and a half, I can never understand the complexity of how land ownership works in Papua New Guinea. But just to offer some perspectives based on my experience in other places, and maybe there is some lessons there related to Papua New Guinea. Over the last few years, I've worked on several large-scale displacement initiatives, displacement-related issues, which were linked to climate change, conflict, or disasters, and in some cases linked to large-scale development projects such as dams. In Pakistan, where David and I both have worked at different times, at the end of 2014, over 2 million living in the border region with Afghanistan were displaced due to militancy and conflict. Previously, I worked on a large World Bank funded resettlement program, which was of origin, or resettle in the areas of origin, or resettle in the areas where they'd moved. Similarly, afterwards, another 40,000 people were displaced by Storm Danielle. That was also in late 2023. So all these experiences offer some lessons, and then as in the international community, we have worked together and learned some lessons. Each context is different, and of course, many of those things may not apply here. First principle, durable solutions to displacement is a concept that the UN and Teresa mentioned, David also mentioned in his opening remarks, is a concept where all of us work with the government with an aim to end the protracted involuntary separation of people from their homes. through safe and voluntary return, local integration, or resettlement. One of those three pathways. And sometimes it's not very distinct. Sometimes it's a combination of those. At upfront principle is that solutions must be voluntary, sustainable, and involve the participation of affected communities. So in PNG, where 97% of the land is under customary ownership, social norms often predispose PNG towards solutions for IDPs based on return to their land. And as Kathy mentioned, often the sense of belonging to land, and we heard it in the morning, is very strong. So often, for most displaced populations, their first preference is to return to their place of origin. The second, so there are examples from research in other cases where social embedding and economic incentives have facilitated the development of kinship-like bonds and the development of insider status. So where communities decide to settle in the place where they're displaced, it is important for the state to invest in building community networks and bringing the communities together and create economic incentives for the host community to host the displaced population. In other cases, so the displacement and land issues are often linked to the political economy of land acquisition. And this was spoken about in the morning, and often it's linked to coercive measures. Is that voluntary? Is that based on APEC, free, prior, and informed consent? Or there is an incomplete flow of information between the parties. And in terms of PNG, again, I mean, what we're more likely to see durable solutions under the current system when certain conditions are met. And those are, first, given that as Kathy mentioned, there is a state system which is relatively new in many areas and may not have the full capacity to operate, but there are strong community institutions and tribal norms which govern land ownership. So when hybrid governance arrangements combine appropriate elements of customary and transparent and fair formal system of implementation with strong national and provincial government ownership. Second, when customary mechanisms create social bonds through substantial reciprocal obligations or investments in social cohesion. So not only the displaced population, but also the host community needs to see that they are a part of the solution. Third is institutional mechanisms maintaining cross-generational obligations. And this was spoken to by the Honorable Commissioner and others earlier in the morning, that land is not a resource for this generation. The elements of sustainability and intergenerational equity are critical. Fourthly, when landowners have economic incentives to accommodate displaced populations. And finally, when displaced populations are not separated from host communities by strong ethnic, religious, or indigenous, non-indigenous boundaries. So those elements are really critical. And finally, I'd like to come to the point about prevention. Of course, displacement is a problem. I mean, it has already happened, whether that's a natural disaster, whether that's linked to climate change or conflict. Often we can do much more before the displacement to prevent it. And the prevention agenda should take a central position. PNG came up with the prevention strategy last year. It is one of the few countries that have a coherent plan of strategy and a plan of action steered by the government of Papua New Guinea. And a few key elements to consider are, one, strong investment in prevention of displacement. So looking at potential displacement through development-led investments in disaster risk reduction, climate adaptation, and conflict prevention. So they offer the best value for money. There are many estimates where $1 invested in prevention can save you several more in terms of response. Second is the sort of nexus between conflict and climate and disasters, where often communities are not impacted by one extreme event, but by a multitude of them. And so looking at that in an integrated way and looking at it as a development problem is important. Thirdly, as the work that Honorable Keith Edau has done as chair of the parliamentary committee, is the legislative and administrative arrangements and grievance redress mechanisms. So when I was listening to the way different land arrangements work, how do you obtain a title or determine whether the land is yours or not, it seems very complex. It seems very lengthy. And for a common person, the transaction costs are massive. So I think that removing those barriers would be essential to sort of making sure that people know what they own and then they can utilize it for economic and social and other purposes. Finally, we cannot overemphasize the point about local governance. Governance at the provincial and local level remains critical, whether that's related to land reform or land ownership or displacement management. Often they are the first responders when a disaster strikes, and they are the ones who know which areas are vulnerable. So investing in those capacities remains important. So with that, I'll leave that.
Thank you very much, Adil. And I'm going to hand, you talked about the prevention strategy and generally sort of the interaction of various different strategies, I think, across the Papua New Guinean ecosystem. Ben, I wanted to go to you briefly just to talk about, as a solutions advisor, what are the policies in place at the moment that could be looked into, or what does that look like in terms of operationalizing those policies on the ground? In communities to address some of the impacts of displacement as it relates to customary lands.
Thank you very much. All protocol observed. Yes, I would like to begin by congratulating the government of Papua New Guinea and the people of Papua New Guinea for demonstrated commitment in terms of addressing the issues we are discussing about today. For example, there is the National Prevention Strategy. There is the National Internally Displaced Persons Policy. There is also the National Framework for Ward Development, and also the National Electronic Ward Record System, which have been recently endorsed by the Cabinet. So my main focus will be to briefly outline some of the provisions that these policies are offering or are extending to the people of Papua New Guinea, including those who are internally displaced, as well as those who are evicted. And I'll conclude by giving us, every one of us, a challenge on how do we translate these beautiful frameworks into predictable action. So if we would look at these frameworks, for example, the National IDP policy presents the issue of displacement not only as a humanitarian issue, but also as a development, human rights, as well as a framework that cuts across all aspects of life. Basically, from the policy, you realize people's basic rights should be met. These are provisions in the policy, including access to housing, access to livelihoods, access to education, access to water and sanitation. But how then do we make sure these processes are translated into action? Still on that framework, we realize that these policies, particularly the National IDP policy, identifies the issue of land, the issue of land tenure, the issue of livelihoods as provisions that are supposed to be extended to internally displaced persons. So, to look at how then do we ensure the implementation of these policies, not also forgetting the wealth of information that we gained from your presentation on international guidelines, for example. There are because, for example, the Papua New Guinea government is already a member of the United Nations. And there are international frameworks like principles, guiding principles on internal displacement that have been ratified by the government of Papua New Guinea. But how then do we translate this into action? I look at the practical steps that we can take. We can look at bringing these international guidelines into action through the development of standard operating procedures for implementation of these policies. When we are also developing the policy and strategy implementation plans, these guidelines can be reflected for implementation. And looking at institutional sustainability, Honorable talked about the human rights, about the Lands Commission, an independent body. That is quite a good framework where we can also bring in the issue, besides land, the issue of displacement management and human rights into the commission. And ensure there is accountability, integrity, and transparency by also ensuring that we engage the affected people to bring feedback to also ensure there is social accountability. So on this framework, just alone, for example, of bringing in the commission and integrating other major components that we are discussing today, we also look at, for example, the National IDP policy. It is a policy that is within or facilitated by the Department of Provincial and Local Government Affairs. This already provides a great opportunity for decentralization through the provincial, district, and local government frameworks. How do we ensure the rights of people to make choices, which is also related to informed consent? The government may need to build its capacity, which the UN is already trying to support, in community-based planning processes, ward development processes, so that these plans identify the bottlenecks and the solutions to the different problems that the internally displaced people may be facing. And how do these ward-based plans inform the district plan, inform the provincial integrated development plan? And most importantly, how do we link them to the resource envelopes, like the district and provincial service improvement plans? Because if we implement these components separately, they become islands of success that will need to be integrated and laid upon one another. So the various community development plans will need to be resourced, firstly by government, but how do we innovatively also ensure that we also bring in many other resource envelopes? There is a need to find the place of the private sector through their corporate social responsibility programs on how do we then translate these frameworks, these plans with adequate resources to implement and achieve the desired results. Lastly, if we look at the issue of learned the issue of displacement, forced evictions, and how we can make sure we have tangible results on the ground. I believe there is need for institutional capacity building, ensuring that government has the capacity to work and deliver. The partners like the United Nations, the non-governmental organizations, faith-based organizations have a complementary role. And once government has the adequate capacity, we expect that there will be translation of the various frameworks into tangible, impactful results, ensuring we do not have a siloed approach, but we have a whole of government approach, where different departments are not competing, but actually complementing and building on each other's strength. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. I want to open to the panelists just to see if you've got any reflections or comments on any of the other interventions made by the panelists in front of us. If not, we will briefly open the floor to see if there are any questions from the floor on this topic. We are running slightly behind schedule, so I'll ask that people's interventions are brief, but it was a pretty rich conversation and different viewpoints and avenues from a very operational perspective, from the lived experience of someone who worked hand in hand with displaced populations, through to policy level architecture, commissions, activities moving forward. So there's a lot to talk through, I think, and there's a lot that's come out of the session, but I just wanted to briefly ask if anyone had any final reflections before we open the floor for any one or two interventions or comments. Oh, sure.
Thank you. I just want to elaborate on another role of the Land Commission, where we can assist with relocation or resettlement issues. The law also allows for special commission hearings to be conducted. Currently, it's been used for mining, oil, gas, petroleum projects. So we also have that added responsibility to determine customary land ownership for mining projects, oil, gas. We currently have the Kainantu gold mine that's before us, Gobe. Supreme Court has made reference to us, telling everyone to stop filing court proceedings and allow the commission to address that issue. So I think that's one of those issues we all need to take note of as well, because when we go to courts, we stop the institutional arms that are responsible from conducting hearings until court makes a decision, and then we continue. So for resettlement, that can be a special project if it relates to a particular area of concern. Then the national government can declare that as a special project and allow special commissioners to be appointed to deal with that particular matter. So that's one of those options under the record. So it's work in progress. Hopefully we'll be able to bring everything back home, store them here, so that it helps us to determine the true ownership over those land that were acquired during colonial days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ben, would you like to speak as well? If you can grab the mic there. Great.
Thank you so much for opening this session to ask for questions and other things. Taking advantage of the people here, legal experts, government officials, and also independent commission. I've worked across various places, probably in 7 countries, including in Africa, Europe, and here, the Pacific Oceania. If we want commitment to all these theoretical issues that we are talking about, I have seen that where we really have issues of displacement being addressed is when we translate policies, frameworks, international guidelines into legislation, the Constitution, which provides for prosecution. If anyone, be they in government, be they a community leader, be they anyone, if they evict people arbitrarily, there is supposed to be a kind of commitment at that level. How do we ensure that we translate some of these things that we are talking about into tangible disincentives for eviction of people. Because at times there is no proper legal framework that ensures that if you do anything that affects the rights of another individual, you are supposed to be prosecuted by the laws of PNG. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for the intervention. Adil, would you like to go?
Not to respond to Ben, that's a complex question, so I'll leave for other panelists to do. But I think just to emphasize one point that I missed in my earlier remarks, and two sort of related. One, the sort of opportunity that urbanization provides. I think sometimes we miss that. Cities, well managed, can be a big opportunity for people who are on the move because of climate change, because of conflicts and so on, and opening up the city land markets and expanding that provides economic opportunities for everyone. And cities naturally tend to better accommodate and appeal to domestic outsiders, if I can use that word loosely. And they can offer more inclusive economies and systems. So that's one point that I wanted to make. And then second is digitalization, use of technology. It can be a big driver of simplification, of addressing many of those. Once the laws are in place, then that can be an important way through which land titles or land ownership is documented and preserved. Looking ahead. So those two I just wanted to.
Thank you very much for the intervention too, Adil. I think we are running out of time. I see questions in the audience. We have many questions in the audience. Please, we'll start at the front. Maybe I'll walk down to give you a microphone.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman of the Parliamentary Committee. The last 2 days, I've got a new lease of life. Yeah. Last year, we celebrated the 50th year of independence of this nation. We celebrate this independence because of the wisdom of our forefathers and wisdom of our founding fathers. We make reference to the homegrown constitution, the national goals and the directing principles, and the evolution of the political democracy of the parliamentary system. But there's one thing that we have lost sight of, that is the reference to 8-point plan and the wisdom of the national leaders of that time, founding fathers, to give us a national vision. The national vision, when they elaborated at that particular time, was to build an all-inclusive Papua New Guinea. All-inclusive Papua New Guinea, where everybody will have a seat on the table. Yeah. In our haste to do this, we forgot the majority of the people of Papua New Guinea are customary landowners. So what we have done, we spent all our money building the Department of National Lands. We forgot about establishing a Department of Customary Land Administration. And I'm thankful for this initiative you've taken, Honorable Katie Duhu, that you build the first chapter of the next 50 years is empowering and liberating the people. Yeah. But that's only one side of the coin. The other side is, when are we going to empower and liberate the women who make up 50% or more of this population of Papua New Guinea? They have their task to do. What about us? What about us? We all know that land is not owned by an individual. It's owned by a clan. Yeah. Yet we sit back and turn a blind eye to people who sell customary land. You don't blame the police. We are the ones. It's our one-talks who are selling customary land. Yesterday there was a reference that we're going to outlaw the sale of customary land. They're not going to do it unless you and I agitate that there has to be certain values that we have to follow in this country. There's right and there is wrong. And it's up to the citizens to advocate what values we should advance in this country. It's not only parliamentarians are doing their job. We, in the citizens, have to do our part by advocating. A lot of reference have been given to ILG. When are we going to look at the independence of the surveying system we have in this country? People go and make illegal surveys in a country and then throw it to the LTC to try and determine the ownership of that land. That's stealing in broad daylight. When are we going to stop this illegal surveying that's taking place in broad daylight? We have to address the issue of that particular act. But it's been refreshing to hear that young lady there. It was very good to hear your passionate talk this morning. And it's very good to hear the passionate talk about from the audience. As Melanesians, we know that land is more than a space. It has spirit on it. And when we talk about spirit, we make reference to the history of the land. This, we call it Ella Beach. The most ones call it, refer it to because it's era, the breeding ground of the turtles. We have stolen the livelihood of the Motu Koitabu people. We have stolen the livelihood of the Ahi people in Ley. We go to the, yeah. But in our haste to build a nation, we forgot that urbanization is a fact of life. Whether we like it or not, there will be people who will be displaced, and we have to come to terms with that. I thank you for the examples you gave us about in other countries. But much of history, you and I cannot slow it down. But you and I can put a stop to some things that are blatantly wrong in this country. And thank you for the opening the next chapter of the next 50 years. I won't be around to see they celebrate the next 50 years, but thank you for having a glimpse of the first chapter of the next 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go down the line very briefly and then...
Thank you so much. I'm Loani Henao. Thank you for organizing this, and appreciate the organizers, Honorable Keith Edu and the United Nations. We gained independence in 1975. 20 years later, 1995, I was privileged to be appointed to spearhead the registration of customary land in the country as a consultant to the Department of Lands. Yesterday and today, I heard emotional speeches from wonderful women and men about customary land. Ladies and gentlemen, this is all not new. This were heard way back in 1995, 30 years ago. The attempt by this country to have customary land registration by records, in my respectful research, started in 1952, when the customary land registration ordinance in those days was introduced. 1952. Since 1952 to now, there have been attempts to formalize customary land for development purposes and also for security of the tenure of the customary landowners. Come 1995, as I said, I went through a number of villages, in the Gulf Province, Central, in the National Capital District, met with many customary landowners. And as you will all recall, that there was a lot of disruptions and interruptions, even to the extent of strikes, stolen vehicles, etc., because of this very, very sensitive issue, the land mobilization as it was known. Do not register your land, because the government is going to grab your land, give it to the World Bank and the IMF. It owns, because it owes a lot of money to the World Bank and the IMF. What the proponents of these slogans did not realize was that we already have lost 3% of the land to the state. Not one single land of those from the 3% was given or transferred to the World Bank or the IMF. We have the freehold title, quite a number of customary land were converted to the freehold title. Not one single land was given to the World Bank or to the IMF. These were the slogans. What we, in 1995, 20 years after independence, there was this attempt to get straight to the issue of taking care of customary land by legislation. And the purpose was not to displace the customary landowners, but first of all, to secure the land tenure as customary owners of a land under a recognized law.